Hello Yu-Gi-Oh players and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I am your host, the RJB0. So now that we are all of 6 days away from the release of Dragons of Legend, I figure it is high time that I began talking about all the cards that everybody else is talking about. So I am going to be covering things like Curry Bandit, Mathematician. I am not going to be talking about Soul Charge. I feel like there's not really a whole lot I can add to that conversation. It's not exactly a complex card. It's like Spellbook of Judgment. You look at it and you're like, wow, that's some broke-ass shit. I wonder what they were smoking when they made that card. Everybody's already said it's broken, it's stupid, it's going to get banned, it's generic rekindling. I can't really add a whole lot to that because there isn't really that much more to say about that card. It is insanity. But I am going to be covering today the Fire and Ice hands. Now, a lot of people have touted this card as being the new Tengu, and while I do not necessarily classify it as being quite that good, they are fairly good cards. The reason why I say that they're not necessarily as good as being the new Tengu is because the things that made Tengu really nice are not necessarily true of these cards. One of the things that made Tengu a particularly good card was the fact that you didn't really have to worry about how it left the field to get its effect. No matter how it left the field, unless it was put back in the deck, which is a very rare thing to happen in the first place, you still got your extra Tengu, which meant you could synchro with it, you could run it into a deep prison, you could do whatever the heck you wanted with that Tengu. Heck, you could tribute it for a Caius or something like that, and you would still get your extra Tengu. The same is not true of the Fire and Ice hands. You actually have to actively get the things destroyed, and then you have to use their effects before you can get your floating, which means that you can't synchro summon with them, you can't do the majority of the things that you did with Tengu in order to make it good. And they also, once again, are weak to Deep Prison, which is becoming increasingly popular as more decks appear that do not run massive amounts of monsters into you at once, making Mirror Force live or something like that. So Deep Prison is becoming more popular, and that's a problem for these cards. And you cannot get the same utility out of them that you get out of Reborn Tengu. That isn't to say that they are particularly bad cards. In fact, they're really good for specific kinds of decks. Here, we're going to be talking like trap-heavy control-style decks that are going to be running this. The deck that immediately popped to mind when I talked about these cards the first time I was thinking about doing video is TG Stun. The reason being because TG Stun is a deck surrounded in cards that are floaters with special effects, essentially, that can operate specifically under skill drain. Now that's important because you need that skill drain to be there to stop your opponent's plays, so when you come along with your special effects, with your Fire and Ice hands, you are going to get more utility out of those cards than you are going to get out, than your opponent is going to get out of their cards. But there are some problems with these cards that make them not even as good as they could possibly be in maybe a TG Stun deck or something like that, which is that the fact of the matter is this is a fast format that we are moving into, and being a generic floater with a decent effect is not good enough for this format. It seems crazy, but if you've noticed, nobody's running Tour Guide. The card is at 3 and it is not showing up. I have seen a grand total of a couple of Dark World decks and one wind-up deck that topped a regional a long time ago that have used Tour Guides since it came back to 3. The reason being because it being a generic floater doesn't get you as far in the game now as it used to. You have to have some kind of extended play associated with a floater in order for it to be usable in the current format. For instance, Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Bear is a floater that gets utility out of being able to destroy cards, but it also gets more bear. And it can also get Wolf Bark. It has a variety of plays that can go along with it, as opposed to like a Fire Hand, which is a similar type of thing in that it can get an Ice Hand and it can destroy monsters, but it does not give you a diversity of plays. Then you go to something like Hieratic Dragon of Tefnuit, which is a floater that it actively summons a monster from your deck when you tribute it, which is what the deck does the most in order to make combos that end you up with an Atum and a Dragasack on the board and a bunch of dragons in the graveyard. Another great example of a floater that is better and is the kind of thing that you need in order to be an effective floater in this format is Geargy Armor. Geargy Armor is just classic floater in that it replaces itself, except for the fact that it can reset itself repeatedly. So you can get its effect off once every turn, and those cards you get with it can in turn get you more Geargi armors. So that's the kind of thing it takes for a floater to be really good in this format, and those cards don't necessarily fulfill those criteria. Once again, they are very good in very skill drain based decks whose purpose is to slow down the game. Then you have a conversation going on. I've considered using them in Dragon Rulers. I haven't actually tested it out, but I feel like they don't give me as much utility in that deck as I would like them to, but it is something to consider. Maybe when a slower format comes, they'll have better card context than they do now, but I do not think they are even near to being able to be considered the new Tengu. So I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below, and of course subscribe for more decks, discussion, analysis, and general Yu-Gi-Oh! Shenanigans. Meanwhile, thank you guys for watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Business Casual. I am your host, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See you guys.